Okay, Prevention is Cure podcast. You were here with Prof. Grant Schofield,
and Kayla Lenferna-Delamotte.
the pre-cure Prevention is Cure R&D team today. Kayla, we've been quite excited about this one and really upping our own game so we can get this out in a coherent way. But probably the most interesting and most studied supplement in all of supplements at the moment is creatine, or specifically creatine monohydrate.
Yeah, I think my first interactions with creatine as a supplement were in my undergraduate degree doing sports science and just seeing how robust the effects are from specifically in strength-based sports.
Well, hang on. That wasn't your first interaction, though. I thought you were telling me before that your first interaction was much earlier than that.
Actually, that is true. My very first interaction with creatine was probably as an 11 or 12-year-old competitive swimmer, and those who come from a swimming background will know what a sort of Wild West approach it is. It's just volume for the sake of volume, and my coach kind of encouraged me at that very young age to start taking creatine. My mum was the wiser and said no.
Okay. Although what we know now is more interesting. Well, hang on, let's take a step back. So, what are we even talking about here? So this creatine monohydrate,
Yep.
It's a creatine molecule attached to a water molecule. There's some different forms. There's a micronized form, which we'll talk about in a sec.
Yep.
But it doesn't end up as creatine monohydrate. It's metabolized into free creatine, and then that is, I think, what's the enzyme? Creatinase?
And phosphocreatine, so PCR, is what ends up being pooled in the muscles.
Okay, so you end up you take this creatine monohydrate, and the micronized form, just to be clear, is the more expensive form you buy at the supplement shop.
Yep.
It's milled down to be finer, and there's really no evidence it's any better.
Yeah.
It all ends up as phosphocreatine, mainly to start with in the intramuscular space around the cells, but then providing stuff into the cells, and then, as we'll see later, in the brain and this sort of thing. So it's a really interesting molecule. It turns out that if you take about 5 grams a day, so typically you buy the stuff. By the way, we're just declarations here. We've got no conflict of interest other than do you currently take creatine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too.
To go as far as our conflicts of interest for me personally are so not there that I couldn't even tell you what brand I take.
Well, I buy the cheapest possible brand.
Yes.
I literally go to the places like, what's the cheapest creatine you got? So the good news is creatine is pretty cheap.
Yes.
It's like $25 a big bag or something. Since the older kids have moved out, that lasts a lot longer.
Longer than having 3 boys at home.
Yeah. So 5 grams a day will pretty much saturate the muscle pool. And I think you can increase the phosphocreatine levels that are held intramuscularly, so around the muscle, by about 40%, which means that you've got more water being held as well. So typically there's a little bit of weight gain.
Yeah, I know that's a big one that often keeps women away from creatine. They go, oh, well, I don't want to gain weight. Creatine's going to make me bulky. Creatine on its own will not make you bulky. Yes, there will be some water retention. That's usually pretty transient, and it goes away within the first 2 months.
Do you reckon that goes away?
Yeah, a lot of women will notice a couple of kgs increase in their weight, and then it tends to taper back down.
Right, and even if you do have an extra kg of water and phosphocreatine, it's not like it's fat. It's useful stuff surrounding the muscle where it has actual effects on helping you be a better human.
Yeah, and I think, just as a bit of an aside around sports performance and women and weight and all that sort of stuff, moving away from weight and towards a performance-based angle, like what your body can do, I think that's such a powerful lens, and one that we can take in health coaching as well. The number on the scale is not the be-all and end-all.
Yep. So if you take more than 5 grams, which has become the trend recently.
Yeah, it's all over social media, right?
Yeah. So this is the nutrient of excitement, I suppose, in the modern world, is that what you'll see is 10 grams, and then in a couple of recent studies, I think one on depression and one on Alzheimer's disease we'll look at later, they were up to 20 grams a day.
Yeah.
So no evidence that any of these doses of any real harm.
Yeah.
But the idea is that now that after 5 grams you've saturated the muscle and the phosphocreatine in the muscle, and now that can spill over, especially across the blood-brain barrier into the brain. Why is that interesting for the brain? I think the brain, when we think about humans, well, actually any animal, but especially humans, is by far and away the most metabolically active organ. Something that's 2% of your body weight, give or take how fat you are, is going through 20% of your energy. A gram of working brain is 16 times more energetic than a gram of working muscle. And so really the idea of phosphocreatine is supplying phosphate molecules to cells, specifically to the mitochondria, which there could be 7 or 8,000 in every cell, especially brain cells. And the reason these phosphates are useful, well, they do get recycled, but you probably lose some along the way, is that adenine diphosphate, ATP, converts to adenine triphosphate and then goes back down again. And that might sound like some way out little energy pathway, but the fact is that is how we produce energy in all animals, is ADP to ATP and back and forth on that little shuttle. And so increasing that availability of the pool, there's a bigger rechargeable battery, is the way we've been reading some people have put it. I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate, but that pool seems to be a handy... Well, is it a hack? Is this just an evolutionary hack, or is it that actually we're just a bit deficient in creatine and we're making up for that lack of it we don't get it from our food? That's an interesting question, isn't it?
That's a really interesting question. I was actually just thinking about, from an evolutionary perspective, our ancestors were probably a little more carnivorous than we are, eating a bit more meat, and meat is one of the places in the diet that the only place in the diet that you can get creatine from. And so I wondered, have we just trended, compared to our very long ago ancestors, towards eating less meat, and are we now trying to top up through supplementation?
So we've had a quick look at how much creatine you actually get in meat, and it doesn't come as creatine monohydrate, it comes as either free creatine or existing phosphocreatine. And there could be in, say, a kilo of salmon or meat, 5 grams. 3 to 5 grams on average. Which is a fair bit. It gets degraded by cooking by maybe 30%, so you lose a third of it. And so I think it's conceivable that a human who's having a whole food diet that has meat in it and seafood could be getting 1 to 2 grams a day.
Yeah, totally conceivable. And so what we're saying, I think, in this podcast is not that everyone's going to be wholly deficient in creatine. That's not a thing.
You can't be deficient in creatine, you die.
You die. But what we're saying is that it's a really beneficial supplement, and the harms, we'll get to that a bit later, but the perceivable harms are so few and far between. It's almost the question of why wouldn't you? Why would you give it a go?
Yeah. So, but even in these little small doses, right, back to the meat, 1 gram a day, so there's, for what it's worth, which is not that much, I'll grant you that the NHANES study, the Nurses Health Study in the US, which follows a large cohort, quite well measured, they estimated dietary creatine from their meat and seafood intake, and the people who were getting about 1 gram a day had fewer disordered sleeps, sleeping disorders and stuff, and you'll see that's really interesting, because one of the current interesting claims around creatine monohydrate supplements, if you had a really bad night's sleep, so there's one study showing if you take 25 to 35 grams of creatine during the day after a 21 hours sleep deprivation, it returns cognition to above pre-sleep deprivation levels. And the effects of sleep deprivation are pretty severe. So just 17 hours sleep deprivation, you're returning the neurological performance of someone who's over the legal limit with alcohol. In 21 hours, you get worse again. So you're not functioning awesomely, and it does return that. I'm not sure about the motor performance for driving, don't do that. But that's an interesting thing, right?
So what you're saying there is that two pieces of research, right? The first is that just from dietary intake, so from estimating from meat, that there is this relationship. We're not saying it's causative, but there is this relationship with improvements in sleep behaviours. And then on the other hand, it can restore cognition.
After a poor night's sleep.
After a poor night's sleep. That's a fantastic thing. Like, why wouldn't you?
Well, you wouldn't, because you would be getting a good night's sleep in the first place, but on the off chance.
Well, I'm thinking of young parents, right, who can't really circumnavigate that too much. Then creatine might be a great supplement in that circumstance.
Sure. So that's the sort of mechanistic stuff. That's where you get it from. I think I see from all these different types, you can get creatine citrate and God knows what other varieties. But as far as we're concerned, our advice is if you're going to be taking creatine monohydrate, the cheapest stuff in the place is just as good.
Yeah.
And in our opinion, we're happy to be proven wrong in the future. Other interesting, fun facts at this stage, and why you should stay tuned to this podcast, is we will have a look at this in a great deal of detail in a minute, but some of the work around brain health, Alzheimer's and depression in particular is astonishing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was blown away by that depression study in particular, which I'm really excited to talk about.
I think we're just going to go through now, and we'll put some of this up on the website as notes, research notes on each thing. So should we start with the tried and true effects of creatine around muscular performance?
Yeah, I mean, like Ron says, right, tried and true. The 2024 meta-analyses, and they took 29 studies and found that creatine supplementation, when paired with resistance training, so that's the caveat, can't just take creatine and expect outcomes, boosts both upper and lower body strength in adults under 50, with greater gains than training just alone. So basically what they did is they looked at people who just trained and did they get stronger, and people who trained and took creatine and did they get stronger.
Was there a magnitude of effect there? Something like 11 kilos for lower body?
Yes, yeah, the magnitude of effect is massive. I'm just looking at that here. So upper body magnitude on 1 RM, so 1 rep maximums, was 4.4 kgs higher, and then lower body strength was about 11.3 kgs, that's a huge effect.
So you have to train.
Yes.
To get strength gains, just to let you know about that.
Yeah.
Choose your hard, there's that. Supplement with creatine, like that's an astonishing effect to be 11 kilos better at a single lift.
Yeah.
Albeit something like a squat, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be happy with that, wouldn't you?
I would be stoked with that. I mean, that's the performance angle, right? The output of, like, can you get better at doing this thing? But then there's also research that shows that you just gain more lean mass as well, which is good.
Yeah. And what was the effect for the upper body?
This is just overall, it's about 1 to 3 kgs of lean mass was the kind of average out.
Of muscle mass as well, compared to someone who's already training but not taking creatine.
Yes.
Over what time period are they looking there? Did they say it's like 3 months or something?
But yeah, it was like 2 to 3 months, I think, is the average.
Yeah, so that's an astonishing gain in muscle mass and muscle strength. Like that alone, give anything else that you can take this one substrate and train, and get strength and muscle mass performance gains. And then we start to think about young adults here, which these meta-analysis were restricted to. But what is one of the biggest things in older adults for frailty and function as we age? And then in public health terms, we talk about morbidity, being able to be alive but healthy. Health span is the precure term. Wow. I mean, obviously you want to be doing resistance training as you get older.
Yes.
Of some sort, or lifting heavy things. If for the 2% of people who still live on a farm or something.
Yeah.
But what we're actually talking about here is supplementing for muscle gain. I think older adults should be. I'd just go ahead and say this right now. If it was me making public health recommendations, and I've had this discussion online over the last couple of weeks, actually, should we be giving people the minimum effective advice? Like just get off the couch, do something because you're doing nothing, and a non-couch potato stands to get a big gain in health from someone compared to a couch potato. But and that's true and that's useful and that could be helpful, but we're ignoring the optimization evidence. And I think you don't go to cancer therapy and go, well, what's the minimum effective dose just so some people survive?
Yeah.
Like people would be really annoyed if the cancer oncologist gave them that advice. So why should the exercise scientist or their nutritionist or their health coach not also be talking about optimization?
Yeah, as somebody who's younger and who's looking at how I want to age and age well, I see one of the biggest benefits is lifting heavy things often, gaining strength and gaining muscle mass. It's so protective against frailty, against even when you do fall, if you've got some extra muscle, you're going to fare better. So I want to age well. I don't just want to age kind of okay. And creatine and heavy lifting are a part of that.
Yeah, well, that's right for you to say because you're still young. I am actually aging. Well, at least I'm significantly older than you, so yeah, I'm closer to that, and I agree for the same reasons.
Yeah. So now let's kind of change tacks and we'll talk a bit about the effects of creatine on endurance. So we've just talked about strength-based activity, so on endurance performance. It's a bit different, right?
No effects,
Yeah.
really. Although in saying that, I have the elite young male triathletes I train
Yeah.
take creatine. They do come and go with it a bit because they get concerned about that 1 or 2 kilos in their running speed, but I don't think it's a thing. And if there are other effects of creatine, they're not just on muscle mass or performance. There's potential, what do they call it, paleotrophic effects, which mean other, in this case I think probably there's other unknown effects of the stuff just sitting around.
Yes.
One of those is likely to be an antioxidant.
Yep.
So that's probably useful.
Yeah.
But by far and away, and we'll talk about this in the next stuff, is glucose transport and insulin sensitivity.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah.
And for repeated high intensity performances. Now, even for the athletes who are doing steady state endurance events, triathletes, marathon runners, these sorts of things, they still do training with repeated high intensity efforts, a couple of times a week, and it's useful for that. So given there's no negative effects and there's potentially positive, I also recommend it for endurance athletes.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, right? When we talk about like what makes endurance better, we're predominantly talking about things like, VO2 max, time to exhaustion at steady state, time trial performance, and creatine's not going to have massive effects on that. But what it does have effects on is, like you were saying, those surge sprints, and sometimes increased time to exhaustion. And so I'm thinking of like your field-based athletes, right? Your hockey players, your soccer players, your rugby players who are going to have to do bouts within a game to speed up and then slow down and speed up and slow down.
I just assume, I imagine, not that I'm involved in elite team sport, people out there will be, I assume every high performance team sport player is taking creatine monohydrate. I can't imagine they're not.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah.
So we've talked about exercise, right? We've talked about strength, we've talked about endurance, and now I'm really keen to start talking a little bit about metabolic health. So what's really interesting is there was a 2023 systematic review of meta-analyses, 12 studies, so not massive, but what they did find that creatine improves glucose control and insulin sensitivity, especially in diabetics, with beneficial effects on fasting blood glucose. And then again, another 2024 study showing that impaired creatine metabolism is actually a marker of type 2 diabetes.
Interesting.
It's really interesting. So I was like, what are the mechanisms here? What's going on? And I will just kind of position this as a caveat that a lot of these are suggested mechanisms that come from preclinical evidence, so either in vitro or animal-based studies. But the first one is this enhanced glucose uptake via the GLUT4 translocation. And so essentially, creatine increases the expression of this, which means that the location into the muscle cells and glucose uptake is better.
You can take glucose out of the blood, put it into the cells, use it in the electron transport change, the Krebs cycle, and even then your mitochondria are operating better as well. So the whole thing just works better. So, we spend a lot of time and money trying to think about things to help get people more insulin sensitivity and decrease their glucose. You want a cheap thing that's going to help. These effects aren't as big as, these GL2 inhibitors and these types of things that will take 60 grams of glucose out of your blood a day, but it's not an effect of that. But this is also not a medicine with side effects. It's not even a medicine. It's just it's a food, really.
Yeah, naturally occurring compound, right? And so the other thing is that if you were taking creatine alongside doing resistance training, you'd have more muscle mass and better muscle function. And muscles are hungry and they like to use glucose, so that's a good thing as well.
Oh, yeah. So if you kept training people on that and did weight training as well, you're going to get the double effect because you've got an improved muscle mass. This is a metabolically useful substrate. We're waxing lyrical now.
Yep, absolutely. And then the other two things that I thought were quite interesting is that there seems to be an anti-inflammatory effect, that creatine might reduce markers of inflammation like CRP and oxidative stress, which we know are closely related to insulin resistance. And so if we can dial down the inflammatory noise, can our bodies just get better then at using glucose and insulin?
Yeah. And so just a caveat on that, we're not aren't anti-inflammation or anti-reactive oxygen species in the signalling, because those are a crucial part of human metabolism. What the problem is, though, is not the acute signaling of that, is that it's chronic inflammation that most people have got. And so, the way to dial that down if there's an antioxidant effect, is likely to be positive.
Yes. Yeah. And then the last one was just some, this is very preclinical, mainly in vitro studies, indicating that creatine may activate AMPK, which could promote glucose uptake and insulin sensitivity.
Yeah, so AMPK is that catabolic pathway, which is also what you get from intermittent fasting, endurance exercise, that sort of thing. Again, that's never, in the state of chronic inflammation and high insulin and high glucose, that's never activated. So that's probably a good thing, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these reviews are coming out like as an adjuvant therapy, so alongside standard treatment, probably, from what I can tell, great idea. And potentially even if you could get to a place where it was just your main source of being better and healthier was moving heavy stuff and taking creatine.
That would help.
That would help.
Yep. Okay, what else have we got? Should we get into the brain health?
Should we get into the brain health stuff? This is really, really interesting. So I'll just kind of read the snapshots and then we can dive a little bit into a couple of the studies. So a 2024 meta-analysis of 10 studies concluded that creatine monohydrate improves cognitive function in adults, particularly short-term memory and reasoning, with single doses boosting processing speed via increased brain PCR and ATP. In healthy individuals, a 2018 meta-analysis of 6 studies showed benefits for intelligence and memory, and this was further amplified in adults who were older, so 66 to 76 years. And there's actually a really interesting 2025 pilot that's just come out on Alzheimer's disease that found that creatine might be feasible, really just for the brain fog aspect of things.
Yeah, who doesn't want better cognition, working memory, reasoning?
Yeah.
And these are not small effects. These are like 5%. I think the Alzheimer's study, they gave them 20 grams a day for 8 weeks, so short-term study, one arm, not randomised, blinded, but they got a 5% improvement in cognition. So who knows what actually happens if you do a randomised trial? Who knows what happens if you keep it going for longer? Do they keep improving? Does it slow the decline? Those are all unknown at this stage. They actually literally wrote in their paper, no one forgot to take the medicines, which I thought was hilarious.
The cheeky little insert there.
yeah, that was interesting. So that's the Alzheimer's stuff. That's the cognition stuff. I mean, yeah, if there is an organ that responds well to energy, about processing efficiency and availability of some of the constituent parts to that function, it's going to be the brain, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as we've always said, right, it's one of the hungriest parts of the body. It lacks lots of energy. The other thing I thought was quite interesting, and this is just animal studies by the looks of things, but there is some evidence to show that creatine can reduce concussion and traumatic brain injury damage in the brain, so just helping protectively afterwards.
I was searching up for that just in preparation for the podcast, and I was looking on X, Twitter, which is quite searchable for these things, but it was interesting how much concussion TBI was popping up. I think pretty clearly if I got a minor traumatic brain injury where I could still actually function, I think I would probably, there's no reason I wouldn't take creatine. I'd probably consider taking ketones. I'd probably also consider a ketogenic diet. I'd probably also consider quite a lot of cold water work. I think that I'd also consider some magnesium. I'd also consider some omega-3s. Yeah. I don't want to get into a sort of Huberman-style supplement stack here, but that's the one thing I would take pretty seriously, just because of the glutamate excitotoxicity and the downward spiral of TBI. But this is not medical advice, by the way, either. But I think I would. There's no reason not to. It's an interesting aside. I think we need to wait for more research to come out with that.
Yeah, I think much like with the Alzheimer's stuff, and we were talking, is there anything in Parkinson's? But nothing there yet. But I do think that the neurodegenerative space and creatine is a watch it space. I think some interesting stuff will come out, but we just don't know what it will be.
Yeah, I'm seeing Matthew Phillips at the Future of Medicine at Hamilton. I should ask him about creatine. I haven't asked him. I should have asked him in that previous podcast, actually.
We should catch him at Future of Medicine and see what he's got to say.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so now we'll kind of segue into mental health and specifically depression. So a 2024 review noted that creatine reduces symptoms, especially as an add-on to SSRIs, by boosting brain energy metabolism. So we're just talking about that, and PCR stores specifically in the prefrontal areas. And that dietary creatine intake is inversely linked to depression risk. So if you're getting enough dietary creatine, there's an inverse relationship.
Is that a potential reason that we think that plant-based only diets that we see in teenagers are a risk for poorer mental health, specifically depression and anxiety. Now, people have criticised me for saying that, going, well, that they're only cross-sectional studies and cause and effect that might have attracted, those are the sort of people who might have been attracted to that way of eating to start with. You don't know. And I agree with all that. But, I think it has potential to help. And I think if you start to do literature reviewing about who would most benefit from creatine, they specifically say vegans and vegetarians are likely to be the most depleted. I'm not sure that's the right word, but would benefit the most from increasing their stores. So that's an interesting thing. Hey, but there's that one randomised trial.
Yes.
Can we bring that up? Let's just read this. To me, this is only one small randomised trial, but to be fair, it is a double-blind placebo randomised trial. Do you just want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'll just read out the name of the paper for anyone who's eager to go digging for it. So it is the efficacy and safety profile of oral creatine monohydrate in an add-on to cognitive behavioural therapy in depression, an 8-week pilot, double-blind, randomised placebo-controlled feasibility and exploratory trial in under-resourced area. Whew, that's a mouthful. What do we actually mean there? What are we looking for? We're looking for, does it work? Is it safe to take a dose of dietary creatine supplementation?
Does it do any harm?
Does it do any harm? And what they're saying here when they say an add-on to cognitive behavioural therapy is that they mean that even though there are these two distinct arms in the study, standard care, which is CBT or cognitive behavioural therapy, was not discontinued. It was in both of the
arms. All right,
arms.
so people come in, they're depressed.
Yep.
They measured depression in the study using a scale that I've used a lot myself called the PHQ-9.
Yep.
Pretty common depression scale. It doesn't diagnose, but it does put people in categories pretty close to the diagnostic categories.
Criteria, yeah.
You maybe need to have a psychologist, doctor or psychiatrist diagnose you, so you're not diagnosing with this, but it gets pretty close. And they both have a sort of median score on this of 17 to start with, which puts them in the moderate to severe category on average. Now, this study is so interesting because of the size of the effect. So for 8 weeks, one group gets just normal talk therapy, and they improve. So they've gone from, I think, 17 to 11.
Yeah, 17.6 down to 11.9. So, that's still it's a great improvement.
Yeah, so on average, they've moved from the moderate to severe category to the mild to moderate category.
Yes.
But now this is the biggest news in science, so far as I'm concerned. Well, that's not overstated, but for a small trial. But it's an interesting new thing, especially given how prevalent anxiety and depression are, but how effective it is. So if you do CBT for 8 weeks and you take creatine monohydrate, you went from 17.8
to 5.8. You go from the brink, from being quite unwell,
moderate to severe, on average,
to being okay. Not just okay, but functioning and okay.
Yeah. So a score of 5 on the PHQ-9 is actually down there, functioning pretty well without even mild to moderate issues. Now, does that last beyond the 8 weeks? What if you just did the creatine by itself and you didn't do the CBT?
Yeah.
We don't know that. I suppose we infer that the creatine result would have been similar to the CBT by itself. I don't know. I don't know.
It's interesting, right? Because it's the age old, like, for some people it's going to be the psychological lens, for some people it's going to be the biological lens, for some people it's going to be a mixture of the two that's going to get them on the right track. What can they stick with? What's feasible long term? All things we don't know. Yeah.
And if you take the view that depression might have an inflammatory and mitochondrial function angle in the brain, then there's good reasons this could work. This is certainly not the size of, this is like a phase 2 trial, not even a phase 2B. It needs to get a phase 3 trial of being bigger, but then, because it's not a drug, who's going to fund this? Because such a trial costs, millions of dollars, and there's not a seller here that's trying to make money off it. So it's interesting what it gets to. And actually in New Zealand, what's interesting is if you do this and it's seen to be successful, creatine now gets moved out of being a food and a supplement into being a clinical medicine, and then you have to meet other standards, which of course those companies don't have the money to do, and then it doesn't get used at all. So there's a a real problem with that. But I mean, I just really like that study. I think that's interesting.
It's such a promising, in my opinion, landmark study that I haven't seen results like that from a similar study, I don't think ever. So it's really exciting to see that sort of work being done. I suppose as we come sort of to wrapping up, it's probably good for us to have a brief discussion around, safety, risk, limitation, contraindications, anyone who shouldn't be taking creatine.
Well, we were debating this. So it's like, what about kids and adolescents? I can't see any reason that adolescents shouldn't take it. Although when you go to medical advice, it's quite clear that you need there's no real data for under 12s, and for adolescents, while there's plenty of sports data, there's no other data, and we don't know about longer term and all that sort of stuff. But I can't imagine for adolescents there's any reason they shouldn't be taking it. I think my 15-year-old definitely takes it.
Yeah.
And so our whole family takes creatine, and I'm surprised that I'm so strong on a supplement, because frankly, for my whole life, besides vitamin D and now creatine, I've been not interested in taking anything. I thought the whole thing was a bit of a scam, to be honest. But I no longer believe that with creatine.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, right? Most of the data when we talk about adolescents do sit in those active populations and not just like kids playing, like very sporty adolescents. The other one I think is quite interesting, because it was the one that pinged in my head, was people with kidney disease or pre-existing kidney damage. And what they found is actually that when we put people with kidney disease, so specifically type 2 diabetes, no kidney issues were taken when taking creatine for months at a time. In fact, blood and urine markers of renal, liver, and cardiovascular health typically remained within normal ranges during creatine supplementation.
Yeah, well, make what you can, but I suppose if you've got chronic kidney disease, you've got a lot of other things to worry about as well, besides just creatine. But you should probably think about getting your blood glucose down for a start, exercising and eating a bit better. But yeah, get some doctor's advice on that, not our advice.
So should we do rapid fire just to wrap up?
Yep.
Is the evidence for creatine strong across the board?
Pretty much, except for mental health where it's emerging, and TBI where it's emerging, but I think those look extremely promising. Neurodegenerative, I just don't think there's much in that. Don't know.
Is it safe to go above the 3 to 5 gram dose per day?
Seems to be. What do you, hang on, quick fire back. When you have your creatine,
Yes.
it's sort of a funny feeling, right? You're sort of thirsty, but you're not.
Oh, that's an interesting point. I mix up what I do with my creatine. So some nights I might put in my overnight low-carb oats and just mix it in with my protein powder, and then I don't even know it's there. Or some nights I might put it in a smoothie. And I actually haven't noticed feeling particularly thirsty afterwards.
Oh, like I mix up this little half glass of water with 10 grams of creatine and a bit of that green stuff, and it's like this shot. Disgusting.
That sounds awful.
No, but it's I do it on purpose. I think there's a medicinal feeling about it.
Oh, you feel quite pious.
Well, maybe there's placebo. Okay, other quick fires, what have we got?
Other quick fires. Is there anyone who shouldn't be taking creatine?
Not so far as I can tell, but I mean, you're not going to put your 2-year-old on it, probably, are you?
Yeah.
Let's face it.
And if you had to make a public health recommendation around creatine, what would it be?
I think it's a safe supplement for everyone to consider taking, and has no real negative profile and quite a lot of upsides, particularly around metabolic health, muscle mass is related to metabolic health, glucose related to metabolic health, and potentially brain function, which are major public health problems. It doesn't solve it. So I did learn a new word about creatine here, which I hadn't considered as adjunctive.
Yes.
Like if you don't do the hard stuff, you don't lift anything, you're not going to get any muscle mass, right? But you do appear to get some better brain function.
So that's it. That's us on creatine.
Creatine, over and out. Hey, it's Grant here. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We don't advertise. We're never going to, but we have one request for you, and one only. If you felt this show was worthwhile, can you please rate us, and please rate us 5 stars? That's it. Thanks very much.